All right, guys, we're back with more Little Legends, the exceptional men in Black history. We've talked about the great Benjamin Banneker, the legendary James Armstead Lafayette, the amazing Frederick Douglass, the legendary Bass Reeves, and the historic Robert Smalls. And so today we pick up Charles Henry Turner was born 1867 and lived till 1923. He was a zoologist and an educator. As a boy, Charles loved bugs. He would spend his days either outside, observing insects and animals, or indoors, reading from his parents' massive library. When his mother had been enslaved and instilled in her son the belief that education would lead to a better life. Charles graduated from high school as his class valedictorian and studied biology in college at the University of Cincinnati. He published studies on birds' brains and invertebrates, becoming the first African American to publish in Science and the Journal of Animal Behavior. Later, he was the first black person to get a PhD in zoology at the University of Chicago. Throughout his career, Charles struggled, likely because of race, to find steady work at a college or university where he could conduct his research. He committed himself to fighting for civil rights and advocating for black students to have a good education. He even dreamed of starting his own school for black children. While he never did, he eventually settled in St. Louis and taught at the historic black Sumner High School. Even though Charles didn't have access to the expensive tools and state-of-the-art laboratories that other scientists had, he still developed research methods to make many amazing discoveries about insects. He conducted experiments and determined that bees can see in color. By building mazes, he observed that cockroaches and caterpillars learned by trial and error. He found that ants use light and landmarks to navigate, and he showed that insects have memories and they alter their behavior based on what they remember. Charles also was the first to notice that ants walk around their nests before entering. This action was later named Turner circling in his honor. By the end of his life, he published more than 70 research papers and changed the way people viewed insects. Charles valued work and knowledge. A pioneer of comparative research, he led by example and forever broadened our understanding of different behaviors in nature. And for that, Charles Henry Turner, we thank you. I gotta tell you, I was particularly moved as I'm reading this. I think about even some of the struggles I've had in my own life. And I just want to kind of make this little, I guess, a call to action as a reminder that your black history is not at all about griping on the hardships or struggles that people encountered. Rather, it is a reminder of how people rose despite hardships. Black history is something that anybody that's looking for inspiration, motivation, if you're looking for an idea of how did somebody take nothing and make it into something, that, my friend, is why you read black history. So let me be really clear. This is in no way to guilt anybody, make anybody feel bad. No, you should feel inspired. Like the brand, just inspired. Charles Henry Turner, this really touched me. I also want to talk about, when I was a child, I was so infatuated with dinosaurs and animals. I wanted to be a zoologist initially. That was a dream I had for a little bit, but I didn't think it was cool or feasible enough, or I figured it was going to be a struggle. So I figured why bother. And I guess I share that with you because that's why I started Just Inspired Mentoring. Because many young people out there, you have dreams and goals that you want. And it may seem too far-fetched, so you think, you know what, let me do something safer. Or many of you are working hard at a plan B and C because you think your plan A is too much. Well, I beg to differ. I think if you had a mentor, someone that really went to work with you and thought about your plan, you don't need to think about a second plan. You just need to really work out what you have because you're young enough, you have enough dreams and ambitions, and you got everything you need to get it done. and listen to these stories for motivation, inspiration. Because remember, think about what you've read so far. If nothing else, think about Frederick Douglass. This man is probably the greatest speaker of all time, and he learned in a time when it was illegal. So how dare you and I say we can't do something? This man became the greatest speaker ever, and it was illegal to learn. You got to take inspiration from this, homie. You got it. All right? Let's get to the next story. Oh, my gosh. I am so excited to talk about this one. Ooh, give me some tea. Dopery tea. I love ginger tea. And because I love ginger tea, I had to find one of the best tea companies out there. So, shameless plug, but if you want some great ginger tea, I strongly recommend that you try Dopery. Ginger tea made by brothers. Seriously, they are brothers, but they're also actually brothers. And it's amazing. I've seen these brothers cultivate this product from an idea. I don't drink it because they're just my friends. I drink it because it's amazing. Seriously. Lipton's got nothing on this, all right? And I dare you to challenge that. Get you some Dopery tea, all right? Anyway, let's get to this next Black History story, guys. I am proud to announce and introduce you all to Arturo Schomburg. Arturo Schomburg was born 1874, and he resided till 1938. He was a historian. Arturo Schomburg. Check him out, check him out. Now, when Arturo was growing up in Puerto Rico, he asked his teacher why there weren't any black people in their history books. She told him it was because black people had no history. Whew. Even though he was just a kid, Arturo knew this could not be true. He dedicated his life to searching for, collecting, and preserving the stories of Africans around the world. Arturo began to research on his own, finding stories of people like the poet Phyllis Whitley and inventor Benjamin Banneker, who taught you about him. Arturo was amazed by the black man who built the first clock in America. Why were there no monuments to him? He wondered. This was the beginning of his quest to find more stories of black heritage. In 1891, Arturo moved to New York City, where he worked as a law clerk. His main job was to index and organize paperwork, skills that would soon come in handy. In the United States, he was able to pursue his new passion of rare book hunting. The books he was looking for were written by black people, were often really inexpensive. Arturo saw for them for what they were, treasures. Soon his collection grew into a library so big that there was no space left in Arturo's house. In 1926, he sold the entire collection to the New York Public Library for $10,000. Its new home was at the 135th Street branch in Harlem. He used the money to travel to Europe, where he was thrilled to look for art featuring black people. Arturo dedicated his life to preserving his people's culture, campaigning for Puerto Rican liberation, and advocating for black history courses to be included in the U.S. educational system. In 1972, the New York Public Library transferred his collection to a facility that would eventually become the Schomburg for research in black culture. Arturo turned a simple question into a hobby, which grew into a passion, which transferred the way we document cultural history in America. Without his curiosity and excitement, so much history may have been lost to the world forever. I am particularly a little overcome with emotion and excitement because I've actually been to the Schomburg myself. And I've actually researched my own family history in there. I want to give a shout out to my Aunt Stephanie. I believe she's in Atlanta right now, but I found her in the Schomburg. Why? Because my Aunt Stephanie was the first black woman to be the valedictorian of Brooklyn College, LIU. I also saw some of the great activities and events that my fraternity, I want to give a shout out to the Epsilon chapter of Omega Psi Phi. I saw pictures of my uncle in the 80s with the legendary Rosa Parks. I couldn't believe it. Some of you knew her as Grace Taylor. Well, she won medals in the Goodwill Games doing jiu-jitsu. She's featured in newspaper articles. And I tell you what, many of you, if you take some time and you go to the Schomburg, maybe you can find some of your family history in there too. There's so many great articles and things that you can learn and discover. And to think, this started with somebody's hobby. That's how Just Inspired started. It was my hobby. To be honest, I've been working with young people for over 10 years. I started with a little website a couple years ago. It was called Just Inspire 85, where I just wrote like little blogs, motivational articles, things that I thought that could translate to people. The website got messed up. I didn't really know how to code back then, and trying to, web design was tough. So the dream got deferred. But last year, the dream got renewed. I had renewed knowledge, and I've been diving in ever since. But hey, this is not about Just Inspire. This is about Black history. Maybe you'll talk about me one day. But for now, let's talk about somebody else who's already blazed the trail. I introduce you all to Garrett Morgan. Garrett Morgan was born 1877 to 1963. Garrett was always interested in how things worked. He had no school past grade school. But he didn't let that hold him back. By the age of 14, he worked as a handyman. And by 18, he had taught himself enough to get jobs at sewing machine companies around Cleveland. In 1901, Garrett sold his first invention, a part for a sewing machine. And a few years later, he was able to open up his own shop. He soon became a successful businessman and inventor. In 1914, Garrett filed a patent for his next invention. After witnessing a fire, he noticed that firefighters combated the blazes with no protection over their eyes or face. He thought that a mask should shield the men and keep them from inhaling smoke. He devised a safety hood that covered the face, using a hose to access fresh air from below. Many people were reluctant to buy inventions made by a black man, so he often hired white actors to conduct demonstrations so customers would give his creations a chance. Eventually, his business grew, and fire departments in Ohio, Pennsylvania, and New York were using his hood. Garrett wasn't just an inventor and a businessman, though. He was also a hero. After a tunnel explosion in 1916, Garrett used his safety hood, rushed in to pull out workers. He saved 2 lives. In 1923, he filed a patent for his next invention. At the time, automobiles were on the rise and were sharing the road with horse-drawn carriages, bicycles, and pedestrians. Traffic signals went from stop to go with no notice, and it was dangerous. After Garrett witnessed a terrible crash, he had an idea for a warning sign. This was a precursor to the red, yellow, and green signals we use today. Garrett paid attention to the world around him and looked for opportunities everywhere. He proved that inventing wasn't just about coming up with new ideas, but could also be about improving upon existing ideas, helping people, and making the world a safer place. Thank you, Garrett Morgan. It's crazy how just thinking about other people, we can create great things that can change all of us, and just could be so revolutionary. I introduce you to Marshall Major Taylor. He was born in 1878, and he lived till 1932. He was a cyclist. Born in Indianapolis, Marshall received his first bicycle when he was 12 years old. He practiced his riding skills while delivering newspapers. By 1892, he was so good at doing tricks that he was hired by a local shop to perform stunts outside to draw in customers. He often wore a soldier's uniform as a costume and earned the nickname Major. The shop owner entered Major in a race when he was 14, and he won. While he was still an amateur, Major drew lots of attention, including from the former racer Louis Munger, who decided to train him because it was clear Major was fast. Cycling was the biggest sport in America, but like everything else, during the Jim Crow era, the industry was incredibly racist. Major was regularly barred from competing. Many were entertained by his skills, others were not so thrilled. He was often harassed on and off the track just for being there and being black. In 1896, he participated in the 6-day race, a grueling event in which 28 competitors biked as many laps as they could in 6 days. It was a test of endurance, strength, and will. Major was the only African American. He finished in 8th place, no easy feat. He rode 1,732 miles in 142 hours, roughly the distance from New York to Texas. That's pretty incredible. This launched Major into the cycling spotlight, I bet. In 1899, He competed in the World Championships in Montreal, where he won the 1 mile sprint. He was the first African American to win a world championship in cycling, and only the second black athlete after the Canadian boxer George Dixon to win a world championship in any sport. For a period, Major held 7 world records. His career was a difficult one, with speed bumps at every turn, but Major blazed a trail wherever he went, and today, many cycling groups around the world celebrate his legacy. In 1989, he was posthumously inducted into the U.S. Bicycling Hall of Fame and remembered for the pioneer that he was. We're not going to quit, right? We're going to keep on going, just like Major did. Hope you guys enjoyed today's Black Stories. Remember to follow, like, subscribe, and please spread the word. Let's keep this going, and let's get everybody learning more about Black history. Thank you so much for listening.